What is up, everybody? Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I have set up in the living room this time, so hopefully the internet's better. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. All right. How's everybody doing today? We get this tweeted out. We are drinking today. I went to Whole Foods and spent way too much time looking for a beer that would be fitting for a season wrap show. And I found this New Glory Brewery. Do You Even Mosaic Bro West Coast IPA. This is New Glory craft brewery out of Sacramento, California, and it's delicious. So shout out to New Glory, making some good stuff over there. See a comment on my hat from Will R. Yeah, I played Tori in December. My dad was in town, and I brought him down there for his 60th birthday. And yeah, so we played. Would have been December 11th, day before the Giants game, and it was a blast. It was so much fun. They were growing the rough out for the farmers, and so it was challenging. But we had a great time. Not at the county resident price. No, I live in Los Angeles County, so I paid the full out of county price. Worth it though. My handicap is not great, like a 22 or something like that. I'm not that good. My brother and my dad are better golfers than I am. All right, we got people in here. People are trickling in. I got to tweet it out. So, you guys let me know what you want to do here. I already got the burps going. I can, rattle off some quick takes off of Staley's presser today and just end of season takes, or we can just hop right into questions and really address the things that you guys are really interested in. So you guys tell me what you guys want to do, and we can really, you guys know that these are usually pretty informal. So, okay. Do both. Yeah, well, we always do we always do questions, so all right. All right, seems like like people at the end of season takes. Now, as far as content, if you're not subscribed to The Athletic already, I wrote a lot about the Raiders game, so if you're still interested in, you know, understanding what happened in that game, I'd suggest you click the link in the description. My final thoughts on the game. I really went in depth on everything. I had a lot of thoughts on the game. So I would start there, but as far as what else is coming this week, Tom Telesco is addressing the media tomorrow at 11 a.m., so I'll have full takeaways over that or off of that tomorrow. And then Friday, I'm putting together this week, rewatching some film and diving into the statistics, and I'll have like a post-mortem on the Chargers season, what went right, what went wrong, what they still need to do to get better for next season. So that'll be coming Friday, and I'm going to leave a lot of my more in-depth thoughts for that piece. So keep an eye out for that. But we can start with some takes, and then we'll get into some questions. I mean, and this is really going to be the crux of that piece that I'm doing Friday. So the Chargers finished with the top 5 offense in football. The offense was not the problem. Justin Herbert was outstanding. Joe Lombardi did a really good job coordinating this offense. They were a threat, obviously, in the passing game. They were a threat to run the ball. They were super efficient. I felt like the scheme really fit Justin Herbert. I know that his average depth of target wasn't what everyone wanted it to be. I think a lot of that was what opposing defenses were doing to him and taking that away. You can go watch the tape and see a lot of the schematics of routes being run deep and deep shots, just being taken away from him. But the offense was really efficient. So it's hard to argue with the process. It's hard to argue with how Joe Lombardi went about this and Brandon Staley went about this, because he was heavily involved in the offense. And what happened was they wanted to create a structure around Justin Herbert that would allow him to flourish. And that's exactly what happened this season. You cannot argue with what Justin Herbert did. You cannot argue with what this offense did, even with injuries on the offensive line on that right side. Herbert set the franchise record for touchdown passes in 16 games. He threw for over 5,000 yards. You had 2,000-yard receivers. You had Austin Eckler score 20 touchdowns. The vision for this offense manifested. What they talked about in the offseason about, Austin Eckler filling a Alvin Kamara role, and Mike Williams becoming a complete receiver, and Keenan Allen being super productive, and Justin Herbert developing and growing in terms of not only his production, but his decision making. The way he protected the football this season was absolutely tremendous. So I really can't pin any of this on the offense. And you saw, the offense brought them back into the game. It really was Justin Herbert, but the offense brought them back into the game on Sunday night. And what happened this season is the Chargers didn't have enough around him. You go look at the numbers, and I actually went into True Media just to get a sense of, okay, how much help did Justin Herbert have? And, Mike Sando, who works The Athletic, this is sort of how he qualifies how much help a quarterback has. He'll take the cumulative EPA from special teams, and he'll take the cumulative EPA from defense, and he'll add that together. And then you can sort of get a sense of, okay, how much help was a quarterback getting on defense and special teams? And I went through that exercise in our stats website, True Media, and the Chargers finished 30th in combined special teams and defensive EPA. There were only two teams that had worse combined special teams and defense this season, and that was the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Jets. The Lions had a better combined special teams and defense EPA than the Chargers did. So that's really what it came down to. The defense wasn't good enough. The special teams, while they improved once Andre Roberts and Dustin Hopkins came aboard, were not good enough. And I wrote this after the game, and I stand by it. It feels like the Chargers, despite the fact that this coaching staff elevated him and allowed him to grow and develop from a roster construction standpoint and from the amount of help he got standpoint, they failed him. And it really showed in that Sunday night game where Justin Herbert made do or die throw after do or die throw after do or die throw. I wrote all about it in my final thoughts. It was like 9 different throws he made. It was the 4th and 6, the 4th and 21 from the 23 touchdown, the 2-point conversion on that drive, 2 4th and 10s on the ensuing drive, the touchdown to Mike Williams on the final play of the game. He had a 4th and 10 to keep them in the game in overtime. Justin Herbert is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. It is an utter shame that he's not playing in the playoffs, and it came down to the 2 other phases of the game not doing their part. And that's really what it was this season. So what were the issues defensively? Let's start there, because I really can't, was it a perfect season offensively? Absolutely not. The drops are obviously, 39 drops. They had the second most drops in the league. A lot of inopportune penalties in key situations, but they had a good enough offense to be playing in the postseason, period, full stop. So we need to focus on the defense. And Brandon Staley was hired, and his reputation was as this defensive guru. I know that's getting thrown around a lot right now, but he was regarded as a brilliant defensive mind. He obviously elevated that Rams defense, the best unit in football last year, and there were, warranted or not, similar expectations for this Chargers group. You had Derwin James back. You had Joey Bosa at edge rusher. And it felt like, the comparisons heading into the season were, okay, Brandon Staley had Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and a bunch of role players around those guys and was able to turn that into the best defense in football. So he should be able to do the same thing with this team because you have 2 premium players in Derwin James and Joey Bosa. It didn't materialize. And listen, guys, we talked. How many times did we talk in the offseason, during the draft, during rookie minicamp, into OTAs? And I kept hammering on these points with you guys. That their defensive line depth was not strong enough, that their safety depth was not strong enough, and that if they had injuries in those places, they were going to have some real issues defensively. And, you can extend that to secondary depth in general, and that's really what we saw this season. The run defense wasn't good enough, and anyone who had spent time around this team and really had a good feel for what this roster looked like knew that it was going to be a real challenge to defend the run on a week-to-week basis. They just didn't have the talent. They did not have the talent, and they were relying on Jerry Tillery to take this massive step as a player this year, and he improved. He was a real impact player as a pass rusher. I'm willing to say that, but his run defending is just not good enough, and it's just not consistent enough. And so that's one of your 3 defensive linemen, and you're relying on him to take on double teams and make plays, and he just wasn't good enough. Justin Jones missed time with that calf injury earlier in the year. Linval Joseph missed a few games because of a shoulder, and then he was on the COVID list, and they just could not stop the run. And there were moments where it was better. It got better after the bye week, but when push came to shove in this game Sunday night, they needed to get run stops, and they didn't. I mean, you go over to the 3rd and 4 that decided the game. I mean, you got your best run structure on the field. There are no more explanations or excuses. Like, you have your guys on the field. You've got Linval Joseph. You got Justin Jones. You've got Joey Bosa and Uchenna Nwosu. You got Kaiser White in the field. You got Derwin James on the field. You got to go get a stop on 3rd and 4. You got to tackle the ball carrier on 3rd and 4. Right? That's the only way that you can give yourself a chance to make the playoffs. You go get a stop on 3rd and 4. You make a play on the ball carrier. And it didn't happen. Because when they needed to get stops against the run in key moments, they couldn't do it. And it was a talent issue, frankly. But at the same time, you can't absolve Brandon Staley and the coaching staff of blame at the end of the day. You come in as a guy who has largely gotten this job because you are regarded as an excellent defensive coach. You should finish better than 28th in defensive EPA. You should finish better than 26th in defensive DVOA. Because Gus Bradley did more with less. He finished better in both of those areas without Derwin James on his team. And so I understand that there was a lot of moving parts on defense this year. I understand that there was a lack of depth and that the injuries and the COVID situation left them thin in a lot of games, but it's got to be better than what they finished. 28th in defense and 26th in defensive EPA and 26th in DVOA. Like, with the talent they have, it's hard to reconcile that. Now, the other thing I wanted to get to, and we can get to questions after this, it was clear that there was a emphasis on getting it right with Justin Herbert, and Brandon Staley said that today in his press conference. Before we get to this, though, the other thing was the 3rd down defense. So run defense was a big issue, and then the 3rd down defense, obviously. Chargers finished last in the league in 3rd down defense, and it goes back 3rd and 4, give up you need to stop in that situation. You can't get it. 3rd and 23 at the end of the half, you give up a draw play for a first down. It was failures in 3rd down all season, and a lot of that stemmed from the moving pieces they had in the secondary. And it goes back to something that we've talked about before on the stream. It's just like there is value to playing a more simplified style of defense, and that value really shows itself when you lose guys and you go through all this attrition. When you play a more simplified version of defense, as Gus Bradley does, you can onboard guys, you can put in young guys, and you expect them to play faster and play better. The way Brandon Staley likes to play defense is a lot of disguise, a lot of complexity, a lot of different variations, right? And so when you're constantly moving guys in, like Tavon Campbell is playing, and Alohi Gilman's starting some games, and Trey Marshall's playing a ton of snaps. Chris Harris misses time. Asante Samuel misses time. Michael Davis misses time. Ryan Smith is in there at one point. You've got Keemon Hall playing some snaps. You have we've gone over it. They played more than 60 different variations in the secondary this year. You're going to have breakdowns in those 3rd downs, and that's really what happened. And so it's an explanation, but I don't think it's an excuse. Like, I think you can explain it by saying, okay, they had all these moving pieces in the secondary, but it's got to be better than that. Like, a lot of teams go through attrition. A lot of teams endure injuries, especially this season with what happened with COVID. And I mean, Houston had more players out with COVID than the Chargers did in that game, and they managed to show up. So I think you can, it starts with the attrition and with the injuries and with the missing players, right? I think that's part of the explanation, but I don't think the Chargers coaching staff did a good enough job with this defense this year, and it should have been better. It really should have been better. So last point I want to hit on, which I had started earlier, it's pretty clear to me that the Chargers, that when Brandon Staley took this job, he knew that the priority had to be getting the most out of Justin Herbert and making sure that his development was at the forefront of his decision making and roster building decisions, along with Tom Telesco. But that was his vision. Like, he knew, and he said this today, and I give him credit for it. He came in and said today, we knew we had to get that right, and we got it right. And this coaching staff deserves credit for that, because when you're going out and you're hiring a new coach and you have Justin Herbert coming off the rookie year that he did, the most important thing that needed to happen this season was him taking a step forward, right? Justin Herbert continuing to grow. And that happened. And a big reason why that happened is because of the way that they allocated their resources in the offseason. They went out and they signed 3 new starters in the offensive line. They drafted an all-pro left tackle in the first round. Okay, and they made sure that the structure around Justin Herbert was going to allow him to be his best self. And they created a scheme that allowed him to be very, very successful. And so they did that. But what they didn't do is allocate a whole lot of resources to the defense. They just didn't. They sort of went into the season with what they had, outside of drafting Asante Samuel Jr. in the second round, which was an essential draft pick. Like, they had to get a corner in here based on what they had on the roster, but that was a necessity. Other than that, they really did not invest in the defense. They kind of just rolled into it with what they had. You know, the only other guy they brought in that was a new player was Christian Covington. Then you could, I guess, and Kyler Fackrell, and you can throw Chris Rumph in there, who played some at edge rusher this year, but was more of a special teams player. But it's not like they went out and added impact players. I mean, Linval Joseph was here last year. Justin Jones was here last year. Jerry Tillery was here last year. Nasir Adderley was here last year. Drew Tranquil was here last year. Kenneth Murray was here last year. Kaiser White was here last year. Chris Harris was here last year. Michael Davis was here last year, right? So Brandon Staley took a lot of these pieces that had been drafted for a very different defensive scheme and tried to fit them into his defensive scheme, because they felt like, okay, we have to prioritize the offense. We have to prioritize Justin Herbert. We have to make sure that this offense is successful, and we'll make it work with the defense. And I understand the strategy, and I think that was the way to do it. They had to fix the offensive line, and they really invested in those areas. But the pieces that they did have in here defensively did not click. And I think it would have been better if they had had less attrition, but it felt like that was a little bit of an oversight. You know, the expectation was that Brandon Staley could come in and take all these pieces that weren't necessarily built for his scheme and turn it into a really good defense. And because of the injuries and because of underwhelming play from some players, you ended up with what was a bad defense. Like, it just was a bad defense. So what's the strategy now? And this is what I'm going to get into on Friday. They've really got this offense in a good place, right? I think they bring Mike Williams back on the franchise tag. I think it's a no-brainer at this point. But you've got some real pieces offensively. You really need to fix the right side of the line. I think you re-sign Ode Ibushi because he was playing it pretty well before his ACL. And then you figure out what you're going to do at right tackle, whether that's drafting somebody or bringing in a veteran, and you're pretty set on that side of the ball. Like, the offense is really good. The offense is championship caliber offense. There's no doubt about that. But there has to be a significant investment in the defense this year, starting with the defensive line, obviously. They have to bring in several players, and there are a lot of free agents at that side of the ball. Uchenna Nwosu is a free agent. Justin Jones is a free agent. Linval Joseph is a free agent. Kaiser White is a free agent, right? And so I think you start by making decisions on those guys. Personally, I would bring Jones, White, and Nwosu back. I'm still sort of making my final decision on Linval Joseph just as an aging player. But even if they re-sign Linval Joseph and Justin Jones, they have to bring in, at minimum, 2 legitimate defensive linemen this offseason. That means an early draft pick, and that means a free agent, because they need pieces. Like, they need players up front. And I know we saw flashes at a Braden Fajoko, and I think Joe Gaziano did some nice things this season, but you need real guys up there, because what they put out there this season was not good enough. And I'll tell you this, they win that game against the Raiders, they make the playoffs, like they would have gotten gashed on the ground in the playoffs. Like this, even if they had made it, I don't think this team would have been able to win a game just because they have such a weakness up front. So it has to start there. And I asked Brandon Staley about it today, and he was pretty honest. He said, he got here and said, "Listen, we got to be more physical. We got to be bigger. We got to be better up front on offense." And they went out and they accomplished that. But he said also in his intro press conference that, "Listen, we need to be a line of scrimmage team. I want to be a dominant line of scrimmage team." And they were good on the offensive side of the ball. They were good enough to be a really good offense. And I don't think they have a ton of issues there outside of right tackle, but they really weren't there. They were not a line of scrimmage team on defense, not even close. And so that's where the priority goes to this offseason, is becoming a legitimately imposing line of scrimmage team on the defensive side of the ball. And additionally, build out your depth on the offensive line, because the offensive line got beaten by the Raiders' defensive line in that game. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, and Storm Norton, commend him for the way that he came in at right tackle and really battled this season. And you can see it. You can go watch the tape. And I know you guys aren't going to like this. Like, he really played his ass off, and I give him a lot of credit, but he's not the answer at right tackle. I mean, that's obvious because Max Crosby had his way with Storm Norton. I mean, it was ugly. 11 pressures. I mean, it was ugly. And so they need to figure that out, because Brian Bulaga is not the answer either. Like, I don't think Brian Bulaga is going to be back. Either he's going to retire, they're going to cut him. The money makes too much sense, and you can't rely on him. So they got to figure that out. But they did enough offensively to be a playoff team. It came down to the defense, and that's where they have to invest this offseason. Okay, that's enough of me talking to myself. Let's get some questions in here. Will Edwards asks, "Hey Pop, when did Kenneth Murray become our best man-to-man cover linebacker? I thought that was a ridiculous thing for Staley to say at post game when explaining why he played so much." So I wrote all about the Murray situation in my final thoughts. I would highly recommend that you click the link in the description to go read about it. I was surprised by how Staley answered those questions, because I pushed him on it, and I said, "Listen, Kaiser White has been your best linebacker all season. I think we can agree on that. Why are you taking your best linebacker off the field in the most important downs in the game?" Because we all saw it. I mean, we all saw it. It's not hard to watch that game and see that Kenneth Murray did not play particularly well. And Staley responded by saying that he felt like, by having Kenneth Murray in the dime package, that they could potentially get to some pressure looks. And Kenneth Murray is decent as a pass rusher. He has that athleticism, and he did create some pressure in this game. He had 2 pressures. They didn't get to a lot of that stuff because they really didn't get the Raiders in those downs and distances. The Raiders only had 3 3rd and 8s to 12s in the game. They were either in 3rd and really, really long, where you're not going to, send some exotic blitz. You're going to drop back into a soft zone and try and prevent, anything over the top and keep everything in front of you. And then there was a lot of 3rd and 6s or less. So they really didn't get to a lot of downs and distances where they get to those pressure looks. So I understand that was part of the game plan. But I did not understand him sitting there and saying that Kenneth Murray was their best man-to-man cover guy. I don't know how you could say that. I don't know how you could say that Kenneth Murray is a better man-to-man cover guy than either Kaiser White or Drew Tranquill. And I know Drew Tranquill was injured in that game, but I just can't wrap my mind around taking Kaiser White off the field in key moments. He's been your best linebacker all year. Why are you going to change things up in the final game of the season? And you can go back to specific plays. Like, did Kenneth Murray do good things in man coverage? Because what they did is they went into that dime package and they put Kenneth Murray on Jalen Richard basically on every 3rd down. Did he do some good things? Sure. But he also had one where he lost Jalen Richard in a scramble drill and then tackled him for a 20-yard pass interference. There was a 3rd and 4 late in the game where he had Jalen Richard man-to-man coverage on a swing pass, ran into Derwin James because he took a bad angle, and then overran the play and allowed Jalen Richard to cut back and gain 8 yards. The Raiders kicked the field goal on that drive. If Kenneth Murray makes that play, it's probably a punt. The 3rd and 23, he overran the runner Jalen Richard again, trying to shed a Darren Waller block. And what did Jalen Richard do? He cut right into Kenneth Murray's gap and gained a first down. And Staley said he had, Kenneth Murray playing on third downs had no impact on the game whatsoever. That's just not true. And so I don't know why he answered in that way. I don't know if he was, upset after the game, which is certainly reasonable. But, Kenneth Murray was not good in the game. He was not good in the game. And I was really confused as to why Kaiser White played his lowest percentage of snaps since week 3, because he's been really good all year. Why wouldn't you rely on the guy that's been consistent versus the player that has all the talent in the world but just hasn't been consistent and hasn't played either? It was mind-boggling to me. I didn't understand that decision. They might think that Kenneth Murray is their best man-to-man cover guy, but I just feel like his inconsistencies make him a liability. And to put a player like that on the field in money downs, a guy that is so inconsistent and so often, misreads plays, gets out of his gaps, is too over aggressive. It just isn't a very sound football player at this point in his career. Why would you rely on that guy in the biggest downs of the game? Kaiser White only played on 6 third downs. There were 20 third downs in the game. If I'm coaching, I want my best, most reliable players in the field. And so I can understand the logic of, okay, we want Kenneth Murray in there because we're going to get to a lot of designer blitzes. I understand that. And I know that you go into a game and you're like, okay, this is going to be our linebacker and dime, and making that kind of adjustment can be difficult. But I don't understand taking Kaiser White off the field in third downs. I don't get that. Now, what I will say is a lot of people were pointing to that Zay Jones deep pass early in the game where Kenneth Murray was running after him. I've rewatched it, and I'm pretty sure that they were in cover 2 and that Nasir Adderley should have had that half of the field, and that he jumped down on a crossing route, a dig route, that he should have been covering that deep half, and Kenneth was just trying to make a play. So I don't put that on him. But there are other plays to point to, So, yeah, I thought that was peculiar. A peculiar answer, I would say. Artillery and Bosa out of position. No. Joey Bosa is an edge rusher. So, you watch the games. I think Joey Bosa tends to be more comfortable from a 3-point stance against the run, but most of the time the Chargers are playing these 4-man fronts in their nickel packages with 2 linebackers, and Joey Bosa is doing what he's always done, rushing the passer. Tillery, I don't know what Tillery is. He's a threat as a pass rusher on the interior in known passing situations, but he's not a consistent enough run defender to be playing on the interior like he does. And he had some success last year as a 4-3 defensive end in Gus Bradley's scheme, but I don't know if he's necessarily out of position. I just don't think that he does the things necessary consistently enough to be in the position he's in the Chargers defense. But he's not, he doesn't have the body type to play edge rusher in this defense either. You could play him as a defensive end in more of a 4-3 scheme, but Gus Bradley did that last year when the Chargers were dealing with some injuries when Bosa had those concussions. But Bosa certainly is not out of position. Jerry Tillery just has a long way to go as a run defender to be a reliable player in this league. Yeah. Haas 44 said it there. 3 technique who can rush the passer and can't really stop the run, which is what value does that provide you? If you're a 3 tech in the NFL, you gotta be able to defend the run, So that's really where I'm at with Jerry Tillery. Top 3 positions of need. D-line. No, I'm kidding. I would say D-line. I would say that's definitely number 1. And then 2A and 2B, I would say right tackle. And I would say corner, more specifically a slot corner. That's just off the top of my head. How high do you think the level of investment in tight end will be? I think they really like the trio that they have, excluding Jared Cook, who's going to be a free agent. I wouldn't really expect them to re-sign him. Um, I think they were just waiting. Basically, they drafted Trey McKitty and then brought in Jared Cook just to allow some of these young guys to see what they had in them. And so, I think they let Jared Cook walk and they roll in next season with Steven Anderson, Donald Parham, and Trey McKitty. And I think that's a nice group. I think that's a nice group. So I really don't. I would be surprised if they invest in a tight end this offseason. Is Pipkins going to be the right tackle? Listen, he showed enough to me to get a shot. I asked Staley about it today, and he said, we need as much competition there as possible. So I would expect them to bring somebody in. I don't know if it's going to be a draft pick. I don't know if it's going to be a free agent. But it should be a competition next year. And if Trey Pipkins continues to develop, he could be the answer there. Absolutely. He has played really well when he's been in the game. I mean, he's played really, really well. That Broncos game and then obviously the Chiefs game at left tackle, he was outstanding. And so maybe they have something there, but I would expect them to bring in a little more talent there just to create some competition. But it's hard for me to say. I would be very worried if the Chargers went into next season with Storm Norton, starting at right tackle. So someone says, just stop messing around with this competition thing and get an established right tackle, please. Who? MR Wiz, Mr. Wiz. Who are you getting? That's the thing, and this happens with you guys a lot, and with just fans in general, where you're like, well, just get a good player there. Well, obviously they're trying to get a good player there, but how do you think that happens? Franchise right tackles don't just appear in free agency every single year. If they do, you got to pay them a lot, and they're usually aging, so you're potentially paying for their decline of their careers. What you do is you draft a right tackle and develop him. So, but it's not as easy as just going, yeah. It's just not as easy as saying go get an established right tackle. It's not that simple. If it was that simple, then everyone would have great tackles. But it's really hard to find tackles. That's what's so impressive about them finding Rashawn Slater. That's another key thing from the season is they have a freaking all-pro left tackle. If you were building a team, right, from scratch, where would you start? Quarterback, 100%. That's where you start. I want a great, dynamic quarterback. Chargers have that, Justin Herbert. What's your next position that you go to after that? Left tackle. I want a franchise all-pro left tackle, great pass protector, great in the run game, can play on an island against every edge rusher in the league. What do they have? They have a franchise left tackle. So they're in a really good spot. And the fact that they got this kind of season out of Rashawn Slater is outstanding. But the right tackle situation is an issue, and it's something they have to address this offseason. I like that. Michael Lopez says Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati and then move Asante to the slot. I think that's possible. The problem is they really like Asante as an outside corner, and he has played well there. He gives you some juice out there. I know he's had a lot of pass interference penalties. I thought a few of those were kind of bogus. They do like him on the outside. Can you get the same kind of production on the inside? I don't know. But I do like that idea. Chris Benhart says we should just draft an Aaron Donald clone and we'll be fine. You and every other team in the league. J.C. Jackson is not getting out of New England. I think they're going to extend him. Bryce Callahan from Denver at slot corner. I know he's a free agent. How old is he? Yeah, he's 30. So it's like you go from Chris Harris, aging slot corner, to Bryce Callahan, aging slot corner. I don't know. I would think they would go to the draft. Now the thing is, They feel like Mark Webb can play some slot corner. Um, he obviously was injured and spent, he finished this year on injured reserve. So how much can you really expect out of him? But I feel like they gotta. I feel like they got to draft another DB early, a guy with with inside outside flex who's played in the slot in his college career. I feel like that has to be something they do early because I don't see them re-signing Chris Harris. For those that have joined late, we're drinking New Glory. Do You Even Mosaic Bro, West Coast IPA from Sacramento, California. New Glory Craft Brewery in Sacramento, California. It's fire. Really, really good. Got it at Whole Foods. Irv says, I think they're going to bring in a new inside linebacker. Do you agree? I don't agree. I think they re-signed Kaiser, and that's pretty much what they do at inside linebacker, and they roll back in the season with that trio. How much say will Staley have in free agent pickups and draft picks? He'll have a lot of say. I mean, Tom Telesco does a good job of listening to his head coach and his coaching staff in general and finding players that fit what the coaching staff's vision is. He's done it his whole career. And so Staley will absolutely have a lot of say in what they do. And you saw that last year when he came in and said, listen, we need to upgrade our offensive line. And Tom Telesco went out and did a really fantastic job of upgrading the offensive line. What's your evaluation of Chris Harris? I don't think he's the same player that he used to be. Obviously, he was dealing with an injury this year. And that's not a knock on him necessarily. I mean, guys, as you get cornerback is a very specific position where the drop off once you hit a certain age can be pretty severe. And I don't think he played at a very high level this year. He definitely had good moments, but overall he didn't really have a good season. So I don't know how you can sit there and say, yeah, that's a guy we want to, re-sign and give a position as important as the nickel corner. I really don't. Everyone's asking about Fangio. I really would be surprised if they hire Vic Fangio. I mean, Vic Fangio can go get a defensive play calling job at a lot of places in the league, and he wouldn't be calling plays here. So, he would come in as a favor to Brandon Staley. Is that basically what you guys are getting at? Like, if I'm him, I'm like, okay, I know I can still call a great defense. I can scheme up a great defense. I've proven that in Denver. I mean, if they had a quarterback, they probably would have had a shot to make the playoffs to Vic Fangio, but they never had a quarterback. And so he's obviously still an elite defensive coach. Why would he take a job where he's not calling plays? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I mean, I don't want to say like definitely not because crazier shit has happened, but I would be really, really surprised if that happens just because I would expect him to get a defensive play calling job. Was Murray forced onto the field by the front office? No, he was not. A trade up for Hutchinson. He's like, give me the first or second pick in the draft. No. Maybe Staley goes to a full CEO role. No, he's not going to give up defensive play calling. I can pretty much guarantee you that. Do I think the Raiders get bounced in the first round? Honestly, I can't figure out the Raiders. Like the Raiders statistically are not a good team, but they find ways to win, man. Like credit to Gus Bradley, credit to that defensive line kicks some ass. Like especially those edge rushers, man. The defensive ends, Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, they create havoc. They play sound enough defensively. Derek Carr's making enough plays. Like that throw that Derek Carr had to Zay Jones in overtime was as good of a throw as you're going to see. So I don't know. I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd say the Raiders are probably going to lose, but I thought they were going to lose to the Chargers too. So, credit to the Raiders, man. Credit to the Raiders. Desmond King reunion for slot corner. I usually don't do this, but I can give a big fat 0% on that. Mike Williams back. Yeah, I mean, Mike Williams played just an incredible game on Sunday night, especially down the stretch. I mean, he had 9 catches and 7 of them came in the fourth quarter and overtime on those last 3 drives. I mean, Justin Herbert put the team on his back, but it was a heroic performance for Mike Williams because he was banged up. He's had a shoulder. He was hurt. Like, he was straight up hurt. I mean, every time he dove for one of those balls, he was laying on the ground for 5-10 seconds. I mean, he had to take himself out of the game on the 4th and 21 from the 23. He was kneeling on the sideline, couldn't even pick his head up. Like, he battled through that and just made catch after catch after catch after catch. Just a remarkable performance from Mike Williams. I mean, to the point where Brandon Staley got emotional talking about it today because he went in the locker room and I mean, Mike Williams was sitting there and just couldn't move because he had expended so much energy and was banged up, and he went out there and made as many plays as anyone could expect him to, and he had a fantastic season. And if you're going to sit here and say that Mike Williams isn't a net positive for this offense, then you're living in the past. You're focusing on his earlier seasons of production and not what he looked like in this offense, because he was a difference maker in this offense, period. End of story. He was a tremendous, tremendous player this season. He really was. And so why wouldn't you bring that guy back on the franchise tag? 1 year, $19 million. That's not like an aggressively above market contract with the way that he played this year and with what he means to this offense. Because you take him away, what does it look like? It looks like Houston. That's what it looks like. Mike Williams is integral to what this offense does. The Chargers, give them credit, starting with Brandon Staley, had the vision to expand his route tree and to make him into a complete receiver. And what does he do? He goes out there and goes for 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, 76 catches, and looks like one of the best receivers in football. Bring that guy back. 1 year, $19 million. If he has a down year, if he has an injured year, you let him walk after next season. But 1 year, $19 million with the cap space that they have and the way that their cap sheet is structured right now, like, that's a no-brainer. That is a no-brainer. Full stop. If you think that's too much, then you haven't watched the Chargers this year. Go rewatch some games, and you'll see what Mike Williams means to this offense. Allen asked, does Herbert need to throw with more touch? Many block passes and not putting enough air into the ball. Justin Herbert is not the problem. He is elite. And are there things he can improve on? Absolutely. He's a second-year player. But we're not going to sit here and talk about, what Justin Herbert didn't do this year, because he was the team's MVP and he was the only reason they were in that game at the end. There shall be no Herbert slander, yeah. The answer is no. He's thrown with awesome touch this year. And I think the batted passes were more of an aberration, watching the film, more of an aberration, just unlucky stuff happening. Chargers play with a lot of RPO and quick game stuff, and that sort of allows defensive linemen at times to stuff up. It's something they can improve on schematically, I feel. But go watch the fourth quarter and overtime of that Raiders game, and then count your freaking blessings that you have this guy as your quarterback. Any answers for Keenan's drops this year? I asked him about it. I mean, the best analogy I heard was from Joe Lombardi. He was like, how many times have you taken a sip of water and had it go down the wrong pipe, right? We all do it. How many times have you taken a sip of water in your life? I mean, think about it. Hundreds of thousands, millions of sips of water. And yet, to this day, I'm 28 years old. I still sometimes take a sip of water and have it go down the wrong way. That's how he explained the Keenan Allen drops. It made sense to me. I like the analogy. I mean, I don't think Keenan Allen all of a sudden became bad at catching footballs, It's weird. I think it's an aberration. I mean, he finished the season with 10 drops, though. Obviously, a high volume of targets, so I think that's a factor in it. But I just one of those weird seasons, just one for him specifically, one of those weird seasons. Swaggy OG says that analogy was trash. Swaggy OG, your username is trash. So, will Joe Lombardi let Herb use his arm more next year? What are we talking about here? Like, what are we talking about? This whole conversation drives me crazy. The Chargers had an outstanding offense this year. They were a top 5 offense in football. A lot of that was how efficient they were. And guess what? Sometimes shorter throws are more efficient. If you go out there every play and you chuck the ball 45 yards downfield, guess what? Your ADOT is going to be off the charts. But you're not going to have an efficient offense. Can they vary things up more? Probably. But go look at the numbers and go watch the film. They've been a really efficient offense this year. They're not the problem. They're not the problem. You coordinate a top 5 offense in football by every single metric, and people are still trying to take away from what you've accomplished and try and pin blame on you. That doesn't make sense to me. And listen, like I will always tell you the truth. I will call people out when they need to be called out. I will always give you it straight. This offense is not the problem. Justin Herbert set every record in franchise history this season. They had 2,000-yard receivers. Austin Eckler scored 20 freaking touchdowns. They went out and said, we want to maximize Justin Herbert, and they did it. They did it. Are there things they can improve? Yes. Were there bad play calls this season? Yes. Were there moments of frustration? Absolutely. But guess what? The 23-year-old prodigy quarterback played his best damn football in the biggest moment in the last game of the season. And is that an accident? No. Obviously, a lot of that goes on to Justin Herbert, but this offensive staff did a great job of putting an offense together that Justin Herbert could master and that allowed him to play at a really high level. So if we're going to have a conversation about what happened to the Chargers this season, let's start with what actually happened, which was they could not stop the run and they could not get off the field on third down. It had very little to do with the offense. All right. I'll tell you what, guys. The John Mara press conference in New York made me miss New York sports radio a lot. So I had to do my best impression of Mad Dog there. Let me know how I did. Adam asks, let's talk about the timeout. Sure, let's talk about the timeout. If anyone has a problem with the timeout, I'm going to go off again. If anyone has a problem with the timeout, okay, type your logic into the chat and send it to me. What was wrong with that timeout? Andres says timeouts are dope. Hell yeah. All right. Anyone have a problem with it? Or am I just seeing one? Also, guys, can we talk about this pickle tweet? What the hell was that? Why was I tagged in that tweet? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody actually give me shout out to Swaggy OG. Swaggy OG is in there still firing off takes, still tagging me. Like shout out Swaggy P. Swaggy P. Swaggy OG. Swaggy P's Nick Young. Yeah. So okay, Jeremy Jones gets to the heart of it here. He says, try to say Carr was gonna kneel in the shotgun with a straight face. That's the thing. You have go, I'm telling you, if you think the timeout was dumb, then you've been listening to people on ESPN and on other platforms that really didn't even bother to go rewatch the game. Because here's what I do. I go back and I rewatch the game and I try and find the truth. What actually happened? A lot of people just heard that it was a talking point and it was a buzzword, and they decided to go on television and on podcasts and talk about it like they knew what they were talking about when they didn't even go back and rewatch the game. Yeah. Okay. Chris W says Pete Prisco and Michael Lombardi. Because you guys were tweeting at me, I actually went back and I listened to Lombardi's podcast today. And Adnan Virk was is his co-host, and I know they were probably reacting right afterwards, but the Raiders were going to run a play regardless. Like it's not so the clock dipped under 40 seconds. The play clock at that point was at 6 seconds. And the Raiders came out in shotgun. They came out in shotgun. So what? They were going to run the clock out? How are they going to run the clock out? The play clock was winding down. They had to snap the ball. The latest they could possibly snap the ball was 33 seconds. 33 seconds. So they were going to have to run a play regardless. The Raiders, if they were really going for the tie, as everyone is claiming, they would have walked up to the line in victory formation. But no, they didn't. They lined up in shotgun and set Hunter Renfrow in motion. And then Staley called the timeout because he didn't have the personnel package on the field that he wanted. So he switched up his personnel package. He took Kenneth Murray off the field and put Linval Joseph in to defend the run because he knew, okay, the Raiders aren't playing for a tie. They're going to run a play here. So we have to get a stop here or our season is over. I just don't understand it. And it drives me crazy. It's like, we get these buzz topics in sports media and everyone is like required to talk about them. But isn't part of your responsibility, if you're going to be a sports media personality, to go do your research? Like at least go rewatch the game so you're not going on TV and going on podcasts talking about this stuff like you know what you're talking about when you haven't even rewatched the game to figure out what actually happened. Like that shit drives me crazy. Do your homework. Spend some time figuring out what actually happened so you can speak knowledgeably instead of just living in falsehoods and misinformation. Anyway, we're drinking New Glory. Do you even Mosaic, bro? West Coast IPA. Clearly a good beer because it's getting the takes. Right. Hot takes get views and clicks. And that's ultimately what it is. All right, let's keep going with questions because I'm on fire right now. Oh man, somebody knows Mosaic IPA. Hell yeah. It's so good. All right, good question. Thoughts on the fourth down decision at their own 18. So here's the situation with the 4th and 1. And I understand that a lot of people are going to disagree with it because trust me, I got on the phone with my dad. The reason that I love football and that I became a football watcher in the first place was because of my father. And so I had lots of conversations with him about football. And he was on the opposite side of it, right? He's, obviously he's my dad, so he's older than I am. And, he's from a different generation in terms of making football decisions. And he thought it was awful. And so I can understand that side of it. I can understand the people that are saying, why are you being so aggressive in that situation? Personally, I'm on the other side of it. I believe in the math. I believe that making sound mathematical decisions over the course of a season will give you a competitive advantage. Okay. But I totally understand the people that are on the other side of it and are saying, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. I've been watching football my whole life, and there's so much downside to this specific situation. But the math, according to every win probability model that we have access to publicly, all agreed that it was the correct mathematical decision. And, I'm going to write about this offseason. We can have a longer conversation about it then. I'm not really here to have, an analytics argument. I wrote about this in my final thoughts. I think the more instructive conversation at this point is, okay, the Chargers have proven all season that this is how they make decisions and that they're going to lean into the math. And when the math tells them that it's a clear decision to go for it, they're going to go for it. And 4th and 1 is pretty much always going to be a go. Now, so, ESPN's win probability model, PFF's win probability model, EDJ Sports win probability model, Next Gen Stats win probability model, Ben Baldwin's win probability model, all said, go for it. The EDJ Sports model said, okay, if the Chargers punt, they have a 36% chance of winning. If they go for it and fail, they have a 28% chance of winning. If they go for it and succeed, they have a 45% chance of winning. So what that means is they need to have an expected conversion rate above 47%. So let me ask you this question. Do you feel like the Chargers had a better than 47% chance of converting that 4th down? Based on what you guys have all watched all these games. You've watched all of these games. Do you feel like the Chargers are going to convert on 4th and 1 more than 47% of the time? Okay, Chris gets to the heart of it. And thank you, Chris, for that comment. Chris says not with that play call, which is exactly what I'm going to get to next. Okay, so the vast majority of you say yes. Right? Like, you feel like the way this Chargers offense has played, like, you feel like that. Absolutely. And here's the problem. I have no problem, and this is just me, and I understand if you disagree with me, and I'm not here to convince you otherwise, because it was an unorthodox decision. And I can understand how it could be jarring for some of you, right? Absolutely. And I'm not here to criticize you or any of that kind of stuff. I can understand the other side of it. But for me, I like the decision. Based on what the math says, based on what I felt like the Chargers offense could do against the Raiders defense. What I had a problem with was the play call. Because everyone in the building, right, knew that the Chargers were going to try and run it up the middle. And all season long, Brandon Staley had said, we make these decisions partly because we want to put the ball in our best players' hands, right? We want to put the ball in Justin Herbert's hands. And to use Brandon Staley's term, we want Justin Herbert to be the decider. That's what Brandon Staley has said this season. We want him to be the decider, which I agree with. Like, that's your best player. Let him decide the game, okay? But what do they do in that situation? They take the ball out of Justin Herbert's hands. I don't love that. I mean, I hate it, actually. Not that I don't love it. Like, I thought it was a bad play call. And the Chargers have been running the ball fine, but in that situation, at least have a quarterback run option in the play. Call an RPO. Call a play action bootleg so that you are literally putting the decision into Justin Herbert's hands. And if he wants to pull it and keep it and make a play, he can do that. But once you call a handoff to Austin Eckler, it's over. And I know they had an advantage look built into the play. The Raiders took that away. So it wasn't just a straight handoff. But for me, like, if I'm in that situation, I'm thinking, okay, the Raiders are absolutely going to stack the box and make sure that we don't run it. Like, I watched the play live, and I'm watching it unfold, and I'm like, if they boot this, Justin runs for a first, and he might even have a free receiver. Why not call a play action bootleg there? So I really have an issue with the strategy of the play call, taking the ball out of Justin Herbert's hands. I don't have an issue with the decision itself because I believe in the math. And when 5 different win probability models all agree that it was the correct decision, across the board, that's called a consensus in the scientific community, right? So I have no problem with the decision. I can understand people that disagree with it. My biggest issue with what happened was the play call. I saw a good question earlier. Who asked that? I can't find the question. Nick asks, when are you getting Frankie a friend? So there's actually a Basset Hound puppy that was up for foster 2 or 3 weeks ago, through where we adopted Frankie from. Tales of the City is the Instagram account if you guys are interested in fostering. Um, and my girlfriend was trying to trying to convince me to foster the Basset puppy, but I put my foot down. We got our hands full already with Frank, who's over there sleeping. All right, we're over an hour. Is there anything else you guys have? Swaggy OG, you got any more questions, or are you out of the stream now? Super Bowl prediction, I got Chiefs Packers, and I got the Packers winning the Super Bowl. All right, guys. I think we're going to call it there. All right. So, final thoughts on the Raiders game are in the description. If you don't subscribe to The Athletic, what are you doing? Everyone in the chat, tell the people that aren't subscribed that they should subscribe. It's everything you could possibly want, breaking down every facet of that game. If you are a masochist and want to go relive that game, you can go do that in the description below. Click that link. I have tons of content to come. Thursday or tomorrow is Tom Telesco's press conference. I'll have takeaways off of that. Friday, I'll have a big piece post-mortem on the season. I'll dive into the stats. I'll dive into every single game. I'm going to go through it all and give you guys a clear picture of here's what happened and here's what needs to happen moving forward. And then obviously, as we go through the off season, I'm going to have tons of content for you guys. Anybody that's been subscribed since April or before then can tell you I go hard in the draft. It's mock drafts. It's every single draft topic covered extensively. So if you're not subscribed, now's the time to do it. Click that link below to get subscribed. On a more sentimental note, I just want to thank all of you guys for joining these streams every week. We started them back in April during the draft, in March during free agency, 6 months ago and 8 months ago, whatever it was. And I didn't know how it was going to go. I didn't know how many people would watch. And we've really built a cool community here. I appreciate you guys coming to all these streams, watching, giving me all your questions. It's been really cool to see this thing build out over the course of the season. And I have you guys to thank. You're the ones that are sitting here watching me talk to myself for an hour every single week. And I just want to tell you guys that I really, really, really appreciate it. Whether you subscribe to The Athletic, you don't subscribe to The Athletic, it means the absolute world for me that you guys take the time to come in here and listen to me talk about the Chargers. So I really appreciate all you guys. Thanks for an outstanding season. We'll figure out what we're going to do with these streams moving forward. Probably, a little more intermittent during the off season. If news breaks or if there's something going on, we'll do a stream. And then we'll get back to them, full fledged, obviously for free agency and the draft and that sort of thing. But I appreciate you guys, each and every one of you. I really do. Have a great off season and we'll talk soon. All right. Peace out, everybody.